Hello, World Wide Web, Internet, friends, and everyone else. Ivan here with Beyond the Noise, Bortom Bruset, a podcast about innate well-being we are born with, and it's always there. I have a guest today, a man I met almost 10 years ago on the internet in a community called Supermind. Do you remember that, Stef?
I do.
Stef Cybichowski.
I do, yeah. And what a beautiful pronunciation of my name. I think that's probably the best I've ever had. Beautiful.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Stef has gone through the Super Coach Academy, if I'm right.
Yeah, yeah.
He's working in England.
Yeah.
And all over the world, which is possible today with the internet and Zoom.
Yeah.
It's amazing what's happened during these 3 years of pandemic, actually.
Absolutely.
Everybody have learned to, almost everybody, have learned to connect through a screen. And this amazing application, Zoom, is just wonderful.
It's certainly
today,
changed my life.
Yeah, yes. Today we are going to talk about Beyond the Noise, Bortom Bruset. The innate well-being we are born with. And 2 days ago, I heard Michael Neal talking about Sydney Banks' epiphany 50 years ago, when he heard a fellow man on a workshop about relationships. His wife was there with him, and this psychiatrist was there with his wife. And they were telling each other how insecure they were. And that psychologist told Sydney, "You're not insecure, you only think you are." And that's turned the life around for Sid. And it has turned my life around. And it has turned millions of people around these last 50 years. It all started with a feeling, insecurity. And beyond that feeling, we have this innate well-being, always available. Yes, Stef.
Yeah, I came across the 3 principles, probably about 11 years ago. And I remember having an insight. I came to it via Michael Neal's book, The Inside Out Revolution. And I read the book probably about 3 or 4 times, and I knew there was something there. There was something there that really resonated with me. I couldn't tell you what it was. I had no idea I had no idea what the book was about. I had no idea who Sid Banks was. And I read the book, like I say, 3 or 4 times. And then I talked to somebody who said to me, how are you getting on with the book? How are you getting on with the 3 principles? And I said, well, I love it. I love what I've read. It really helps me I feel good, but I don't know why. And this friend said, are you trying to compare it to other things that you've done? Because I trained in NLP and CPD and all sorts of psychological strategies and techniques. And I realized when she said that, I realized that I'd been trying to figure out principles by trying to see what I recognized in other things, totally intellectual, totally with my head. And she suggested, she said, why don't you just come to it fresh, without beginner's mind,
Yes.
And I said, okay, I should do that. And everything began to make a lot more sense once I managed to remove myself from the noise in my head. Because I was looking for information, like we do in every area of our life. Yes. We're just looking for information and trying to analyze it and make sense of it. But I realized when I wasn't trying to make sense of it, when I wasn't trying to use what I already knew to make sense of it, then I touched a different space. My mind got quieter. I recognize this now, but I didn't actually know that was happening at the time. And when my mind got quieter, I went beyond the noise.
Yes.
And then in that deeper part of us, that deeper dimension of who we are, the words were fresh and new, and I began to see things in the book, even though I'd read it so many times, that I hadn't seen before. Things were landing with me that I just hadn't recognized.
Yes.
So I began to talk with people about it. And I began talking with Michael Neal, who wrote the book. And I remember when I came to the principles, I was very anxious. I was a very insecure person. I'd spent my life feeling like I was pushing against the tide and I wasn't getting anywhere. I would go days with anxiety and depression, and I remember at one point, some years before, I actually went to a therapist, and I said, I think I have low self-esteem, or and I feel very lacking in confidence. And this therapist said, well, let me see. So low confidence, you know, that's probably about 6 months worth of therapy there. But low self-esteem, oh, I can't tell you how long it's going to take to fix that, you know.
Yeah.
And so when I came across the principles, I remember having a moment of insight where I saw for a moment, I saw that the idea that I had of me having low self-esteem, you know, me having that feeling of not being good enough for most of my life, I got to see that might just possibly be a thought. I got to see that it really wasn't who I was. You know, I thought that I was a person who had low self-esteem and was not worthy, not good enough. And when I began to see, like Sid saw his insight about insecurity, I mean, I didn't see it on the level that he saw it, nowhere near. But I just had a moment where I began to question where my beliefs about my low self-esteem were coming from. And I tell you, Ivan, in that moment, it felt like the biggest weight in the world had been lifted off my shoulders. You know, I used to believe that I couldn't, you know, I couldn't apply for that job because I wouldn't be good enough. I couldn't go to that party because there were so many people there and I was afraid of people. I couldn't ask that girl out, you know, because I wouldn't be good enough for her. All of a sudden, that feeling just kind of lifted. And I began to see the interesting thing is here, I began to see that all throughout my life, there were times when I wouldn't want to go to the party or ask the girl out, go for that job. But there were other times when I actually did stuff that required confidence, you know, required self-esteem. So I was a musician, you know, when I was younger. I was a professional musician at one time, and I remember thinking to myself, so if you have low self-esteem, how come you manage to actually get on a stage in front of thousands of people on some nights and do what you did and enjoy it without feeling nervous? So I got to see that with my low self-esteem thinking, my belief that that was who I was, I only ever saw the times when I was feeling a lack of confidence and not good enough. I didn't see the times when I was. My idea of myself wouldn't allow me to acknowledge that, you know, I can sometimes be quite confident. That was a really interesting thing for me, because I got to see that we have a bias when we look out into the world, and we have a belief about ourselves, when we have a conditioning, either self-conditioning or life conditioning, we only see what we think and what we believe. So that was my first insight, was I'm not lacking in confidence. Sometimes I am, sometimes I'm not. I'm not I am good enough. And that was huge for me. That insight alone kind of changed my life.
Yes, high five. I've been there. I wasn't a musician, I was in sales.
Yeah.
And I remember in school, the worst things to do was to stand up in front of the class and present something. It was horrible. I was sick for a fortnight before.
Yeah.
So in my mind, I was worthless of presentation. And then I made my living for more than 30 years doing presentations. It was all from 1 to 50.
Yeah.
Doing presentations I was working in IT, so it was a rather high tech.
Yeah.
But I enjoyed it. I loved it. And what is the difference? To me, it became obvious I was seeing through the illusions I made by my own thinking.
Yeah.
It was an illusion, everything. And when I saw through it, it vanished.
Yeah.
And that's the same for every one of us, because we have the same internal operating system in all of us. We are functioning the same way. So it's the same.
That's poetry.
Yeah. Yes, it is. And I get goosebumps from your sharing. It's I recognize it. It's you told my story.
Yeah. And I think that the mind, the intellect, the ego, whatever we want to call it, will never tell us that we're good enough.
Exactly.
Because it's trying to keep us safe,
Yes.
It's trying its best to make sure that we have to improve ourselves.
Yeah.
And we can't go out of our comfort zone. We can't take risks because our mind is there to keep us safe.
Yeah.
So I think it's probably one of the biggest, most inspiring, freeing understanding that we can have, to realize that we are not that mind, that we are not that thinking, that we identify with so closely. We think that what we think is A, true, and B, is who we are.
Yes. Yes. And throughout our learning from child and all the way through school, we are taught to believe in the content of our thinking.
Absolutely.
No one is talking about what the power of thought really is.
Exactly. Yeah. The fact that we think rather than
Yes.
what we think. Yeah.
Yeah. And maybe that's because that's the reason I'm so engaged in young kids, their mental status.
Yeah.
Because they are worth so much better.
Well, I worked in a school teaching the principles for a couple of years. And the reason I was asked to work in the school was that there was a teacher within the school who knew about the 3 principles, but didn't know how to introduce it into the school. So what I found was, instead of creating a program, to try and teach the 3 principles to all the kids, the school wouldn't allow that. But we were asked to share the principles with a group of kids who were on an at-risk register. So they were kids who were self-harming, who had suicidal ideation, to kids who had been excluded from school because of bad behavior. There was quite a long list. So what we did was we took the kids one by one. We had one-to-one sessions with them. And I'm kind of feeling quite emotional thinking about it. When those kids began to see that they weren't what they thought about themselves. Yes. They weren't the self-criticism and the self-torture, and they weren't what other people said about them. When they began to see beyond the noise, as you say, and they began to see who they really were, they began to see that they were an expression of life, an expression of the divine. It was like they'd suddenly been allowed out of jail. They'd been allowed out of this tiny little box that they'd made for themselves or been given about what was possible for them.
Yes. Not good enough.
Exactly. And it was so beautiful to see how these kids who kind of had been dismissed for bad behavior and who had been harming themselves, how quickly they turned round, how quickly they returned to school, how quickly they began to make friends and enjoy life. We had one instance where we began doing a little class for the kids at lunchtime, and it started off with maybe 3 or 4 kids that we were been coaching, and then they began to tell their friends about it, and before we knew it, we had 30 kids giving up their lunch hour to have this conversation. All, and you know, the kids we were coaching were telling their friends what they were learning and what they were seeing, and there was such a beautiful ripple of understanding that went out through all these kids. And they began teaching the new kids in the school. You know, they began having conversations, and they would do drawings and things based around the principle. There is just something so magical about when people get to see the source, the essence of who they are, as opposed to what we've all been conditioned to believe.
Oh, it's so beautiful stuff. So beautiful. And now I know what the title of this podcast is going to be. You said it some minutes ago, and it is Experiencing Life.
Yeah.
Beyond the noise, experiencing life. Beautiful.
That sounds really good to me.
And we passed 20 minutes.
Oh dear.
Up to 30. Yes.
I've talked too much again.
No, it's beautiful. We have to do a part 2.
Must please. Yes, let's do that. Let's do that.
So much love.
So much.
Thank you for coming. It's been beautiful.
Bless you, my friend. Thank you.
Yes, you too.